With it being after 7 o'clock, we'll start the February 8th meeting to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have minutes. Review it for recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Next one is an RDA for 1160 Great Pond Road, Brook School. This one right here.
So this is for a fairly substantial project. Only a portion of it is within the jurisdiction of the commission. I've reviewed the wetland line, made some changes which are reflected on the plans in front of you, and I will turn it over to the permitting team for Brook.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Cleaves. I'm with Whitman and Bingham Associates, civil engineers for the project. Also here with members from Brook School, Paul Griffin, Chief Financial Officer, and Norman Grenier, a Facilities Director, and also Andrew Leonard, who is the landscape architect for the project. So as you can see in that first sheet you have in front of you and up on the board and on the TV screen there, just an overview of the campus. And so this project is for a new arts center. And the focal point of the project is that highlighted yellow area in the center of that plan. That's where there's an existing building, we'll do some demolition and put in a new arts center. And associated with that, with some excess fill that could be generated, we're planning to regrade an existing soccer field, and that's on the bottom left-hand side of the plan that you have there, also highlighted in yellow. And then if we so associated with the Arts Center project, there are some wetlands between the existing building and Great Pond Road, and you can see that on the first white plan that you have in that packet in front of you on the board here on the screen there. There's a wetland system between Great Pond Road and some existing tennis courts and a pool area. And so those wetlands, as we are in the watershed protection district, come along with that offsets pertaining to the watershed and the general zone, non-discharge and non-disturbance zones. Our project is over 400 feet away from those wetlands. We did walk those wetlands with Jennifer and made some changes that she had mentioned. And so that plan that you see there gives you an idea of where those wetlands are, but our project doesn't even show up there. We're just on the edge of that plan. So we're outside the buffer zone there. We are going to be fine with the planning board for the watershed protection district. But the other part of the project, the regrading of the soccer field, does come within jurisdiction of, or close to jurisdiction of the wetlands there. And so this is an area, existing soccer field, close to Campion Road side. And there's a wood line there. So the proposed improvements here are going to be just regrading the existing soccer field. Not going to disturb any more trees that's already been disturbed, going to stay in that existing area. Just below that you see the wetland line, and then further down is the lake. So we're probably going to be at least 50 to 70 feet away with the anticipated disturbance, maybe even further away if we can just work in the soccer field area with the grading. But it really just is regrading. And we have erosion controls encompassing that entire work area. We're proposing straw wattles and silt fence. The slopes are not going to be expected to be steep. We're just flattening the soccer field and then grading that out, maybe to a 10-15% grade out on the edges. And so that's the overview of the project. Also, just to let you know, Lisa Egelstein has been reviewing the project for the town, and we got some comments from her earlier this week. I was able to speak with her and go over some of those. And I think we've addressed most of those comments. I can go through them if you'd like to see what she's brought up. I'll be happy to go through those with you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we have any questions.
Sure.
Thank you. Joe?
Hey, on the soccer field area,
Yep.
just kind of
curious about the process. You've got good topsoil that's overlying some sort of subbase.
Yes.
Is it to strip the entire area of the topsoil, import in
Correct.
common borrow fill material from the other project?
Yes.
Grade it all and then return everything? What's the total acreage of disturbance?
We're looking at, in that area, about 2.5 acres, I think we're about having there.
So
So
you're
we're going to have to file.
It's going to trigger a swimming?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, plus tying it together with the disturbance of the main project, you can't segment it, so altogether, absolutely, it would be more than that 1 acre threshold. So we'd have to do a SWIP and file a NIPD's permit.
Okay, and along those lines, what I'm not seeing on this is, and maybe just not seeing it, is what are your intentions of stockpiling all those topsoils
Yeah,
in the
so-
interim period,
Sure.
once you strip them? Because
Yeah.
we need to keep those out of the way and protected.
Absolutely, yeah. So the intent is probably in that upper left-hand corner of the plan where there's no grading, no proposed grading shown. That would be the stockpile area. Just strip it and push it onto that side, which is the furthest away from the wetland area. It's still within the erosion control barriers, and then bring in the fill and then push it back.
So do we know what depth the good organic material is that you're going to be stripping?
It's been averaging in that area 6 to 12 inches of organic material. And what the contours are basically showing is on the westerly side of the soccer field, we'll be raising the grade of common fill about 2 feet, 2.5 feet, and then pushing the organic soil back on top over everything. So we basically want to reestablish that 6 to 12 inches of soil back on top of the common fill that's brought over.
Okay. In timing of when you would do this?
As part of the project or time of year,
Time of year?
so it's probably summer.
Summer. Yeah, the intention is that this earthwork happens while school is out of session as much as possible. So it would be during the summer period. It wouldn't start before June 5th. June 5th.
Okay. Can we look at the larger overview slide? Probably, Jeff, would be easy to put up of the campus. Does anything break
first one.
back towards the front where the other pond areas are? I know we have the Lake of Chickawack itself we're concerned with, but the other, I'm going to call it the duck pond, the goose pond, along Great Pond Road itself, it's well, it's actually the other side of the baseball field away, isn't it?
So the arts
Yes.
building
Oh, yeah.
drains.
Oh, yeah, so it's, you're not going to go there at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that ridge you're talking about is
Yeah.
way over here.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all set.
Okay, it looks like the Center for the Arts project, the limit of work on that is well outside the 100-foot buffer zone of the closest wetland, is that?
Correct.
is
Yeah,
that
we're
true?
both 400 feet or so away.
Okay, that's
Correct.
well outside 100 feet for sure. And I notice on the soccer field portion of the project that you've got a limit of work, well, you've got a proposed straw wattle and silt fence, shown as a dotted line on the plan. Is that
Correct.
the limit of work?
Yes.
That you're going to be using?
Yes.
Well, it looks to me like that is, easily 75 feet away from that B-series wetland. So if that is an accurate depiction of what you plan to do, I suppose I have no more questions.
Yes, that's correct. Yep, thank you.
So you have Eggleston Environmental reviewing?
Correct.
And you are going also in front of planning?
Correct.
I'll reserve any comment till that happens.
I just
Thank
have
Yeah, thank
two
you.
questions on Mr. Lynch's was scheduling of the project, and I'd also like to see elevations on the land disturbance at the soccer field, because I just like to see, my concern is that there's erosion and potential sediment flowing down into the wetlands below. So those are my only concerns. The scheduling, he answered June 5th. That's the dry season, that's perfect. So just the elevations, what's it going to be, a 3-to-1, 4-to-1,
10 to 1?
10-to-1?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, right now, it's probably closer to 15 to 1. So what we're doing is we're leveling the soccer field play right now, because right now it's way too steep for safe soccer play. So we're leveling that out and increasing the slope on the downhill side a little bit, but it's still only going from like 6% to 10%. So it's not like a a 3-to-1 slope or even a 4-to-1 slope.
So those dark lines that you see on the plan, those are the proposed contours?
I'm old on this plan, it's
Yeah.
very,
Yeah, I know, it's a very small one. Actually, I have a larger one, I can bring it over.
really, I'm going like, come on. No, I don't have a problem, as long as 10-to-1 is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Actually, can I have full-size? Because I don't think you gave me any full-size, right?
I would like to see designated stockpile areas on the plan.
Sure.
I mean, I know you're saying that's where they're gonna put it,
They go
but I'd like to see it on the plan so that we know, because sometimes what we agree on, the contractor might have a better idea. A different idea.
Not better,
Different.
not better.
So, I mean, that, normally, even on residential, we ask for a stockpile and construction access.
So while we're talking about that, so our intent would be to put it up in here. Would that be okay to the commission?
As long as it's inside the erosion controls, because you do have that swale that runs down that side, and we wouldn't want anything to get in the swale, which would wind up
We were planning
putting.
on bringing that way up, just
Yeah,
in
that-
case there's some over disturbance there. Yeah, so we can show a stockpile area in that upper corner.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, you stated that Lisa Eccleston was reviewing the plan, and she had 2 concerns. Could you just state those briefly?
She had a few items that we've gone through,
I
and
emailed them her response from today,
Oh,
which were
okay.
the 2 things I told you about, was
Oh, okay.
that 1, that it is clean fill, and that 2, the erosion controls are adequate.
Okay, so those were the 2.
Those were the 2
Okay.
she addressed today, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The clean fill, it's borrow coming out of the other construction site. What's the, I've got to be careful how I ask the question. What's the profile of the soil that's in there? Is it an urbanized area that's an old part of the campus where there could be?
Most of where the cut is occurring is actually existing landscape area. So there's probably a couple of feet of various grade soils over time with loam and gravel. But below that is the same till material that's kind of all around campus, is that kind of tilling material, which will actually help the soccer field because it doesn't have irrigation.
I asked that in the context of when Lisa says clean fill, and we use the word clean fill, what does it clean really mean? And clearly, if it's parent material, surplus parent material, I'm not concerned with it. If it's urbanized filled material and there might be
Construction
oil
debris.
tanks and other stuff,
Yeah.
that's the stuff we don't want coming in.
absolutely, oh, yeah, neither do we. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that Deb?
No,
All set?
set.
Doug?
No question.
No
I
question.
had one follow-up, so we asked the timing, time of year, but you started off with timing, and lastly is the final process on revegetating. Is it going to be I'm sure people would love it to be sod, but I'm sure it's probably unaffordable.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's the process on reestablishing the turf?
It actually should be about the time, a good time of year in that September timeframe. Assuming everything goes smoothly with the excavation process, it should happen while kids are not in school. Then in the September timeframe should be where the loam's coming back over and hydroseed is occurring. So in theory, it fits with the
So it
getting
could be
quick germination.
2.5, 3 months of disturbance.
Correct.
in the
Well, yes, but it depends on how it's executed, so that's something we could work with them on to minimize how much they have disturbed at a given time. Because since the fill is linear, we could actually have them disturb in a linear fashion and put back over. So
Okay.
we can put that in the construction documents. I don't think that will affect the contractor at all. As long as they can easily dump material as they go, there's no need to strip the whole thing in one moment.
I'm also there.
All right. So
So-
you want,
I discussed with them about possibly continuing, just because once we issue a negative determination, it's based on a certain plan and a certain design, and given that the planning board had to cancel their meeting last night, it probably doesn't delay the process at all, because the planning board won't have issued their special decision to, the planning board meets the 21st and we meet the 22nd, so just,
we never approve anything when there's another board outstanding anyways.
I mean, I don't think we could. I think their review is going to be much more about the building itself. This is within their jurisdiction from watershed, so I think
Right.
it makes sense to wait for their comments, but if there aren't any on this particular aspect of the project, it should be easly to close it out next time.
Yeah, I don't see any hang-ups coming from us, but I just.
Yeah, but we have no issue, waiting. It makes sense, to wait till you get all the information from the planning board in case something changes. That could be a minor change that you'd have to look at. So
Right.
if that's,
Okay, So I need a motion to
So
continue.
Jim, what's going to form our record? Is it just this part plan, if you will, and not the overall?
So we talked about, you know, they didn't really need a formal delineation. They needed to get their watershed line established. So we did review the line, but we didn't review it in the sense of like you know, we wouldn't do that much of a line under just an RDA typically. So I think we would just work confirming this process, this plan.
These two sheets?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, I can cite them in the determination as plans submitted, but, you know, I think the description of the work process will be just this.
Okay, so we have what, barring any changes coming out of the plan, but we have what we need as far as the record drawings will be.
Yes.
Okay.
I do need a motion to continue.
So moved.
I don't know if there's any comments, but
That me?
I don't know if there's anyone in the
Are there any
audience.
butters here for Brook School?
Not answered.
Motion or no?
Motion and second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Who were a motion in second?
Deb and Al.
Definitely.
All set.
Great, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next one is 724 Shapless Point Road.
Who?
Hey.
So this is a fairly simple filing in that the homeowner has an existing deck that he would like to enclose. The site is outside of the 50-foot no-build zone. Was a minor snafu in that when Heidi went out to look at the front wetland, which is on the front side of the house, deck's on the back side of the house, there's an ephemeral pool in there, what the commission calls an ephemeral pool, and that it, you know, likely holds water for more than 2 months in the spring and has those vernal pool characteristics. So technically, the buffer zone in the front should actually be a 50-foot no disturb and a 75-foot no build. The house is legally there and constructed, so it doesn't affect the proposed project. Her recommendation was to have you review it, and if there were no additional changes to the plan, that's something that could be revised pretty simply.
Joe?
Well, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the project or describe.
No, I've been emailing Heidi back and forth, any questions she's had, so I think you have all the information that she has.
If I could add, for the record, I'm Bob Mansour, I represent patio enclosures. We're building a sunroom on top of an existing deck, and we can show you what the existing deck looks like. There is a set of stairs coming off the side, and I don't know if you have a set of plans of what's in there now, what we propose to do. On the proposal, we're going to change that stairway by adding a landing. Building code requirements require a landing to come out. So all we ended up doing is digging a couple of post holes, just simply post in for that landing. The holes are done by hand. And once the building inspector looks at it, we can mix concrete, fill it up, and build that set of stairs. The sunroom itself is aluminum. We fabricated in our factories in Ohio, and it's constructed. It probably takes about a week to 10 days to physically construct the whole project. So the disturbance is very minimal, just digging the holes in the ground and building a set of stairs. The existing deck is there, the posts are all there for the support system. Nothing else we have to do except build the sunroom.
Thank you. Joe?
So everything's within the existing envelope of the current deck, with the exception of the stair alteration, which clearly looks minor. In the end, all of it will be still meeting the 50-foot no build, so we're going to be in compliance on finished product. So the front setback is just a notation of what was noticed. It's an old house. It's properly built at the time the regulations were properly met, probably. So there's no issue with that front line, it's just, that was just for information only to us, correct?
Well, I think the buffer zone should be redrawn on the plan to reflect the ephemeral pool, just because people will rely on this plan going forward because Heidi did confirm the delineation.
So it's the notation of the 25, 50, and then...
It should be a 50,
Should be also
75.
75. It should also be 75, okay.
There should be no, in the front wetland, there should be no 25. It should be a 50, 75.
Got it. And just to show up, but that doesn't affect this project at all. So just to clarify the record, okay.
Heidi
I'm all
said
set.
the line falls somewhere right in the middle of the existing house.
I'm all set.
Jack?
Are you gonna be changing the deck at all to put the sunroom in?
The existing deck is staying, they're just building the sunroom on top of it. It's not,
12 by 14
Yeah.
deck, and we're just building a 12 by 14 sunroom.
So it's an unheated sunroom?
correct.
Oh, okay.
3 season rooms.
Seems like an easy project, except for your representation here. We know him from,
Well,
You'd have been better off on your own.
He asked me to come, and I said, well, it could help you or hurt you.
Yeah, he'd been better off on his
Now,
own.
let me put it this way. If anyone wants to go to 99 later, I might be there. I know that chair is still there.
That's not an endorsement, it's just a statement of fact.
No more questions, thanks. So, Jen, my question's for you. So we have no problem with the filing, you just want the plan revised to identify the ephemeral pool?
Right,
Is
and
that
the,
correct?
and
Other
the
than that, the
associated
project
buffer zones. No issues with the
No issues
project.
with the project, just we want the revised plan. Okay. All set, thank you.
Deb?
No questions.
Doug?
No questions.
Motion?
So.
Do we want to, we're waiting for a revised plan.
I think there's nothing about the project that changes. I don't think I think upon receipt of the revised wetland buffer zone and notation of the ephemeral pool, we can just issue this. It would be a negative number 3 with conditions for biodegradable silt sock. And
What's the need for the silt sock?
I think it's the slope in the backyard. I don't know, there's only
The only
2
wind
posts.
disturbance is the
The
sonotubes.
Couple of posts.
That's
that they
it.
by
It's
hand.
right up against
You don't
the
need
deck,
for
so it's
silt
not even
sock.
outside the area.
So pre and post in, but I don't think there's any erosion control necessary.
Okay. I didn't write it, so pre and
And
post.
also the
no
wetland
C.
markers at the 25?
And did she put, oh yeah, so, and then we should put our standard wetland markers up.
So moved,
second?
As amended.
as amended.
You have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, good to see you.
Okay, next one is,
You guys are talking too fast. With receipt of plan, right?
yeah,
Donna would have had that all done by now.
don't make a laugh.
No cackling allowed.
Next one is 242-1698, 865 Johnson Street.
So, per your request at the last meeting, we received the revised plan. Has the square footage of the isolated wetland on it as well as the revised wetland line in the area that we requested. This thing has an echo tonight. I wrote the ORAD of draft, which is in front of you and mentions the review, if we don't receive some kind of filing, review of the
Waste?
dump area, historic dump area, per Sean's request at the last meeting. So with that, I think you can close and approve delineation as shown on the January 31st plan.
Any questions, Joe?
None.
Jack? Al?
Question. So, on your order of resource area delineation,
Mm-hmm.
paragraph 3 is what you referred to that notes the historic unauthorized dumping site?
Yep.
So we're going to allow that to stand as of this filing, but memorialize it for a future filing?
Is that what I understand?
Right. I think Doug asked that it be mentioned in the ORAD so that it doesn't somehow fall off the radar if this should come back.
We said if they didn't move anything forward within 6 months, in August 9,
Right.
that we'd like them to come back and tell us what they're going to do to clean it up.
Right.
Just if this deal falls through.
I just said that the commission may require the removal and restoration of the area under an enforcement action if no filing is received for the property prior to August 9, 2017. And the word "may" is in there, so I think it'll be up to your review at that time.
Okay. All set. All set, thank you.
All set. Doug? Motion?
Approve the order? I move to deliberate it now, or do you
No, I
want to close
think-
initial decision, deliberate at the end?
I don't, however you want to do it. It's short and sweet, so if you want to just do
Get it out
it.
of the way, yeah.
Let's do it right now.
Here, Sean, move that we adopt the order of resource area delineation as drafted.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. All right, next one is 242-1689, are they continuing?
They're continuing because the planning board meeting was canceled, so.
Thought so. Motion, 242-1689, motion to continue to next meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And we have 242-1697, 315 Bradford Street, requesting continue to February 22nd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1699, 1 High Street.
I saw them.
Yeah, they're out. If they're not ready, we can table them.
Yeah, the whole slew of them out there.
Boy, we got a whole team.
Okay, what plan would you like me to put up for you?
Well, probably the ones we sent you yesterday, I probably should have updated ones.
Outlet plan, the profile plan. Okay. Different plans.
And there's full-size copies. Take a look at it if you want to.
Is that from you today?
Yeah, today. Are they the same ones or no?
Yeah, this is the one.
Oh, so I don't need your, because if you sent them to me.
Okay, yeah. David sent it to you, so the,
He's a little, he's old, he's got that eyes.
Outlet plan?
you know, the plan, maybe the best one to start with. Go.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah, you can give one to me and then we should be good.
We,
Are we okay to use a lot?
You can, or that they can, they've got them in front, they're there for the
They're on that.
viewing audience in front. And
All right. I'm David Steinberg, here on behalf of RCG North Andover Mills LLC. We're appearing before you tonight. Both, I think it's worthwhile to give an update on the emergency work and to discuss what I think is evolving into our final plan to replace the pipes that had collapsed previously. So just as far as a quick update of where we are, work's been sort of trudging along as we find our way through the site. We've currently got an 18-inch HDPE pipe that we are pumping the pond into to try to regulate where it is. and that is tied into the culvert down at a catch basin. It's essentially all the way to the left of the structure shown on that plan. Ultimately, we'll be tying that pipe into what we expect to be a permanent solution for the culvert system, for replacing the culvert system. We have two 48-inch HDPE pipes that were readily available and are ready to go into the ground now in 20-foot sections at a time, that we're digging our way back from the hole that currently exists, where we've run into the culvert structure toward the buildings west or left on your plan. And over the next couple weeks, those pipes should be able to get all the way back to the pond with any luck. And I think otherwise we've got pretty good site control and erosion controls and other things as we've been operating back there. And we've been moving carefully to not disturb, as you can see, the number of crossing utilities there. As far as the NOI that we filed, so, you know, that work will continue, and basically our emergency work permit will be running out in a couple weeks as we finish that. We want to get in an application to get in the structures ultimately that will serve for the future weir structure, and essentially the second structure being a vault to tie the two 48-inch pipes into and drop it there into the culvert and make a connection with two ductile iron pipes that will essentially sleeve into what's right now a 10-foot wide arched culvert underneath the buildings, where it goes underneath the buildings. We're here tonight with design consultants, who is a civil engineer on the project, Julie Von Drack, who's been the environmental monitor and acting as the wetland scientist for the project, and Tanya Hartford, who's a project manager from RCG. And maybe Mike from DCI can take you a little bit through the technical points of the plan.
So, thank you for having us. Just about a week ago, we submitted an NOI with more of a conceptual plan, and have done some further investigation and engineering. So, I'm going to stand over here a little bit, bring the pointer. So what we found was, as David said, in this location is the existing arch pipes, and they connected to the existing pipes that are under the building. We verified the diameter at 48 inches. So in this location, in the original NOI submission, we showed a cast-in-place structure, and due to the timing and the concerns about getting things in a quick fashion, we are proposing now and in the process of trying to contract and procure precast structure. The structure comes in pieces, and it's of a size that it can be trucked onto site. I think you heard David allude to what we're planning to do to connect to the existing structure is slip two ductile iron pipes into the existing pipe and then backfill around the area with concrete so that they're in place and they're sealed in that location. We've also been pumping from the pond into the system to make sure that we're bypassing the water through the system. So what also has happened is, in this location, we've added a, make sure that we've added an additional pipe underground to a manhole so that the vehicles can go through that area without going over the hoses and damaging hoses and that type of thing. And it was also designed at an elevation so that it may or may not be used at a later date with the permanent structure. The biggest change to the plan right now is we were proposing temporarily to go with basically a plunge pool for the initial outlet structure from the pond, which would have been a graded area full of stone, and then allow the water to drain through that way. We're in the process now of changing that into a more engineered structure, so it would be a precast structure, large enough in size so that would cover both the proposed pipes that are currently being installed. We relocated the location of it. There is, when I was interpreting the 2007 delineation, I made it a little bit of a calculated with the resource area. So currently, there really isn't any BVW on site, but there's all bank in that location. And what we did was moved the structure from this area over here to an area where there's some erosion channels and more of a degraded bank to try to have less impact. And the structure basically, if you go to the next page, this is the profile view. We have coming into the pond, right now we're proposing to be at elevation 88.5. That'll be protected with riprap. There'll be a concrete weir here at elevation 90. And that'll drop down into this manhole and into the twin 48-inch pipes that'll carry it to the other structure that's located in the middle of the parking lot. We're in the process now of evaluating the hydraulics, so some of these elevations may change. But I think the concept that we've come up with is two things: going from a temporary and then coming back with a permanent design. We're trying to minimize the time span that we're impacting in potentially altering the resource area. And then also we also looked at relocating it. Quickly, I'm just going to say that we do understand that we have to go back in, do an up-to-date delineation, and also look at mitigation, but I can let Julie talk about that. But first, before I turn it over there, if you have questions.
Joe?
I know it's probably premature to ask you, you said you're still in the throes of hydraulic evaluation.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the principles that just make sense, and I'm sure you're looking at, what the mean pond height is. The pond is an old mill pond. It's a managed elevation. So, whatever the other headworks looked like, there were probably flashboards or control gates. You need to make certain, of course, that you're maintaining your pond elevation at a mean elevation, and then being able to still manage your flashboard elevations at your varying weir height, weir established elevation, and then, of course, the width of that. But I guess, ultimately, the twin 40H HTPEs can move a lot of water. What I'm looking at is a structure that's no wider than 22 feet. I mean, those 48s will never flow full.
They'll never flow, no.
Not even
We don't anticipate them flowing full, and we had, the old pipes were oval-shaped brick, and they were somewhat larger. But there were also steel, the ones that collapsed were cast 48 inches. So that part we understand. It's this end of exactly what you said, is how to work out the final details on the hydraulics at the outlet structure is what we have to look at.
So what we have is a relic of an old hydro-powered mill facility, which still functions, and because it's adjacent to a statutory wetland, we've got control over it. But really, I mean, is there some sort of, I'm curious, I don't know the answer, is there a Corps of Engineers action that needs to be happening in parallel to this, to control what really is an outlet structure to a dam?
I mean, dams that's a whole different ballgame, Office of Dam Safety, and creating another weir or dam may subject you to some kind of regulation. You may have to register that structure with them. It's not any part of what we do.
Right, but I want to be careful that whatever process we go through doesn't give the impression that we're approving it ad hoc for all of those other things. I think that from a permitting perspective, people need to understand there may be others besides us that might need to chime in on this.
Doesn't the filing of an NOI kick off a review that would include?
Not the state.
No.
Yeah.
No?
So, and maybe Julie knows better, but, I mean, there are triggers for others to get involved, Army Corps of Engineers and general, you know, I don't know that any of those thresholds have been tripped.
Back in 2007, I don't have a DEP file number, but we filed part of the parking lot project.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was actually a new structure proposed for pretty much one similar location to us. I don't believe that time we had any permit for that, so I'll have to look at the design. But we did propose a new rear structure. It was filed under, it's actually filed under limited project provisions, which I believe is water dependent use. But this new outlet would also be filed under those two. So we did that, and we did a whole review of like compliance with bank standards. But I don't think we had triggered any 401s. We were under the thresholds. We were under 5,000. Basically, we have less than big impacts, possibly no land underwater impact. So I know at that time, I don't believe there was any Army Corps, you know, depending on whether it's new design or outlet. But at that time, we had some hydropower too.
And I asked the question not knowing the answer, because I just want to be very careful that, you know, we're not looking in the microcosm of the Wetland Protection Act, recognizing we are managing the flow of water through what potentially could be a regulated dam by others.
I'll look into it, I mean, just to make sure. I mean, those thresholds are clearly listed in several locations on the websites. I do think there'll be 50 feet of bank alteration, even if some of it's temporary. So there's a threshold for a wildlife habitat evaluation, just a very minimal one. I think even one of our applicants here tonight had to do that for an intermittent stream. And I do think there's land under water body, because anything below mean high water is land under water body, so.
Correct.
Mean
Mean low. And
Mean
so
low,
none of
yeah.
that bank work is below mean low, it seems?
Well, at this point, the plan, we may be creating land underwater if we're bringing it on in, but we actually won't be impacting existing, we might actually be creating new.
New,
So right
okay.
now, it doesn't look like there's anything below 88 is the mean low.
Yeah, so there will be some small work on the mean low.
Just to tie into it, we'll actually be gaining some land underwater.
And the last point I wanted to make with regards to the hydrology, you know, we're in the business typically of looking at, you know, peak attenuation and flood control and minimizing, you know, flow rates as it hits another body of water.
Right.
And that's what we typically control ourselves with. But, you know, where you do have a mill pond and you've got an impoundment behind it, there may be riparian rights that others have that obligates you guys to maintain certain pond elevations. I have no idea what those might look like.
Yeah, and the main focus of this is trying to maintain the existing condition. So we want to try to replicate the existing hydraulics as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so that's, yeah.
And every one of those questions is unfair because you haven't gotten that far yet. So, but those are the types of things I will be looking
Yeah,
at.
no, and that's the key. I mean, it's in a different location. It's unfortunate that the existing headworks is right on the building. There's really no bank there. We really didn't have that much of any real alternative to do it anywhere else that was, you know, close to being economically feasible. That wouldn't have caused even more damage to one of the resources out there, you know, either the land on the water or the bank. So that's kind of the thought process there.
Okay, I'm all set for now.
Jack?
Yeah, you're operating under an enforcement order and you filed the NRI?
Emergency cert.
Cert.
Oh,
No
the-
enforcement
yeah,
order.
The emergency cert, yeah, sorry.
Theoretically, another 14 days thereabouts, right, on that?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at we
About,
gave them
It's
the
good
full
for
30 days.
not more than 30.
because didn't, we approved it
For 30 days.
last meeting.
Yep.
So you've got your NLI filed, you're proceeding in a good way. Could you tell us what what progress you've made to date and the approximate timing of the designs for both structures, the vault and the inlet structure?
Well, I think, so as far as progress on this site, as I said, we haven't even started laying these pipes underground yet, but we're planning on getting those in place over the next 2 weeks. As far as the design of the structures, we believe they're properly sized at this point. and it takes about a week and a half, 2 weeks of engineering, plus 3 weeks or so to get them on site from the point they're approved from the shop drawings. So we're looking 5 weeks out if we release them, say, this week, to get those in. Even if we got those in and in place, which we'd like to move ahead with, it would still give us an opportunity to adapt the elevations and the regulating structures. So tying into that weir, if we're going to have other controls like the controls we had previously. So there's some room to still work within those structures as long as we get those on order. So one of the things we were trying to accomplish is once we realized we had this temporary condition with a giant plunge pool, as we're going to take out a lot of the bank and not know what our final condition would be, the engineers recommended, listen, we should really find a structure that can fit into a spot and allow us to move faster to protect that bank. So as long as we get this application through, we're sort of moving in parallel, hopefully, and releasing those engineering drawings.
So once you have the design of the two structures, probably a little bit more engineering,
Correct.
on the DCI side. I guess what I'm getting at is when do you expect to ask us to approve your notice of intent?
Well, I think it's not necessarily in a condition to approve, it's not done yet, but if over the next 2 weeks we can get our calculations together and
I think actually that's a good question about how we want to proceed with the work, because we're working under an existing emergency order. If that lapses, we're kind of in a bind, because you can't really work when that lapses. It may be worthwhile to ask for a couple week extension of that. And
It's extended, but we'd have to do,
I think there is. You can ask for an additional,
well, that's what we had asked at the last meeting. Okay, so you've done some more research.
no, it's not a matter of research. The form says right on it what's allowable.
because we could, at this point, we could also bring it to
The emergency starts anyway.
and what we thought we were going to do was going to bring it to a temporary solution, have orders issued that would imply that, we stabilize the site, now we're going to come back and either reopen the hearing with amended application. But over the last 2 weeks, the project's moving a lot faster from the design side than we thought it would when we initially put together the application.
I think what the commission's telling you is you can't put this stuff in until you have their approval.
Right, no, that part I understand.
Okay.
I'm just talking about what it's done under. Is it done, some of the more of the work done under the emergency order? Or, do we have it all done and do it under the no certain time?
So what I'm hearing on your initial presentation was you sourced the 48-inch high-density polyethylene, they may already be on site.
Yeah, they're on site.
They're on
They're
site.
right, they're going to start
So
going in.
your goal will
next
be,
week.
under the emergency certification, to lay them in dry.
Yep.
From point A to point B without the structure on either end.
Right.
But you know what grade they're going to be at, what elevation they're going to be at.
Correct.
So you're going to get a slope, lay them in dry. All under the emergency cert. And then under some window of time, probably coming up to the expiration of that initial 30 days, you'll probably then have an answer for what these two precast constructions look like in all the specifics about elevations and widths and so on to control the hydraulics.
Yeah, with the exception of, I believe, that this structure here, we're 99% of the way there.
Okay, so that may also happen under
The emergency
It may
order,
also. So what I'm hearing then is that the final NOI will be the ultimate headworks,
Right.
a plunge pool and everything else that goes along with it, is what will be the final aspect of it that may be on the cusp of expiration of all the emergency work and the final NOI. Do I get the sequence right?
I think that's correct. I think it would be, depending what the extension conditions are. I don't think we'd be putting in the
Permission of
structure
the
on the
commissioner.
bank without the...
No. But
Permission of the commissioner,
Yeah.
DEP.
the other question, though, to ask is, do we, as we go and we operate under the emergency orders, in this location here, do we come up with a solution with an excavation and stabilization that allows the pond to go to a natural flowing situation instead of trying to pump it? And
Right, so in that emergency period, right, two 48-inch pipes will essentially be sticking out into the bank somewhere. And we'd rather not be running a whole pumping operation and trying to control that level, the pond, if we can let it spill over into those pipes before we get the structure in.
I think you have to.
Based on the profile inside, I think they're gonna be too deep. I don't think you're gonna be sticking up into the bank. I think they'll be falling just short of the bank, right? What was
Yeah,
your
so
idea?
in a permanent situation with the plunge pool and the side slopes, yeah, it's definitely too deep. We would be out into the pond and that type of thing. What we were thinking about was more of a temporary situation where the slopes are steeper, we're watching them and letting the flows go, and they're supported, with larger stone.
That sounds like seat of the pants,
Yeah.
big risk.
Sounds like you're opening yourself up to erosion.
I even there was a hint of hesitation in your voice when you were saying it.
And I think under the
I don't know how
emergency.
you analyze that.
Yeah, I don't think under the emergency cert you can do that, only
Yeah.
to abate the emergency. So if the continued solution is to continue pumping, I think you have to do that. You can't do work under this that goes further than abating the emergency. I mean, I think at this point, even the work you're doing could be, it doesn't seem like it would be reversed. I think the commission's on board with what's going forward so far.
Yes.
But hear me out. The pumps could stay on site theoretically. Pumps can stay on site to handle peaks when an event comes through.
Yeah.
But maybe most of the time, maybe several siphons
Yeah,
will allow you to get the water down into this and move away.
and that's a good idea that we, tell you the truth, we're throwing around that we can take a look at. It's the issues, even with the best maintained, like has been going on out there with the pumps. Something go wrong with pumps. Overnight. You don't have someone there full time. A big downpour. So we're cognizant of that, but I also want to stress this is very temporary because the plan is, as David said, is to get this thing, designed and procured and installed within 5 to 6 weeks, and go in that direction, and then also follow up with the rest of the things we have to do under the regulations.
Yeah, it should be said, the pumping, in a peak condition, a storm condition, if there were any serious storm, the pumps wouldn't keep up with it.
So the mechanism for an extension of emergency is strictly the commissioner of DEP.
According to the regs, which are very short on the
So-
emergency.
They probably have no knowledge of any of this.
Well, they do. This went to DEP. I doubt the commission, it's raised to that level. I just worry because the
I
emergency.
was going to recommend having them open up a dialogue of giving them an update of where they stand, what the next step is, and the likelihood that they might be likely asking
I can
for
have
an
that,
extension.
start that conversation at a somewhat lower level, I think. I guess my concern is the emergency that was to be abated was declared by the building inspector to be the potential collapse of the concrete floor within the existing building. I think that emergency has been abated. So to keep operating under an emergency cert, you need a new emergency, because technically the emergency that was abated was concrete was poured, that building is reoccupied, we don't have that emergency anymore.
Well, with a strict definition, I agree, except with the exception of we're still stuck with water in the pond that we need to move.
Just where I was going to go, I mean, I'm not going to make a case for you to the commissioner, but you have attenuated the first emergency. You're
Yeah.
trying to prevent the second one, which will be, could be a catastrophic failure of a dam wall and further undermining of the embankment here.
And again, we're not, in no way are we looking to circumvent the process. We're just looking for a way that works so that my client can still continue to do the job they're trying to do and also address, the other issues we have to address. So I guess if we requested for an extension,
I can find out tomorrow what the process is.
I believe that's something.
That was my point.
That
Better
the-
to start that dialogue now than wait for it, the day before the thing expires.
Or is there a question
And
to
I think we could.
file for a different emergency? Because you're right, the other
Right,
emergency's been
right.
abated, and if we refile for,
And I think we could define if we needed to, define what we're doing under the notice to tenant itself and get things stabilized. We're still gonna run concurrently from a design procurement situation. But, you know, we still have this process open, so.
I wasn't here for the 2007. Did somebody review the structure that was proposed previously? Was there anybody who went through a peer review of?
Lisa, that's what you proposed. It was Lisa. It wasn't this part of the pond, though, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm not thinking it's gonna be too far different from what we kind of proposed back then, to be honest with you. I mean, I was looking at the old narrative the other day, and again, it was filed as a limit part of the different provisions. I believe Lisa did the review for that.
That's my recollection,
And
too.
I have to touch base with them. Some senior records too, on all the reviews, but.
And again, the only thing that's really different is the timing. Okay, so we, you know, would like to get the structure in as soon as possible.
Did you look at the design that was done back then?
I know David has, and one of the things we talked about today is that, you know, we have to, as we discussed before, we have to make sure the hydraulics are equivalent of the structure. They're not gonna, you know, they're not the same, but they're gonna be equivalent flows, equivalent low water, equivalent high water, that type of thing. And, you know, we also have to remember that I'm going to call it the old inlet structure wasn't managed, it just flowed. So whatever we do here.
It had flashboards, right?
What's that?
It had flashboards, didn't it? It may have,
Yeah.
it may
Yes.
have,
Yeah, so the
obviously at one
existing-
time it was managed, but it just.
Yeah, no,
ceased to be
we
managed.
managed it.
Yeah.
We would control it, keep, you know, water in the pond, or keep it lower when there were storms coming, to some extent. But I think the structure that was designed in 2007 was designed, actually, is something a little bit different. I mean, the pipes it wasn't to replace the existing system, it was to supplement it and put some hydropower into it.
That's what I remember too.
And use it in a different way. So, but it was essentially the same location and same conceptual design, where the pipes were going, where the
Does the
dam
lack
was.
of hydropower, though, take away the water-dependent use for a limited project? Just putting that,
Look at that.
yeah. This didn't strike me as that, but I haven't looked at that either. It just seems to me that if the commission's being asked to kind of approve things rather quickly, if they had some outside review, that would probably make this process a little easier. Given that we have two engineers on the board, but they also tend to have other things to do.
Al, questions?
I just was under the impression that at the last meeting, we had laid out what was approvable under the CERT and what needed to be filed for an NOI. I'm listening to a slightly different story, and it sounds like you're looking at a new emergency?
Well, it's not, personally, I don't think it's a new emergency, it's a continuation of the same one.
Which is a blurry line with the notice.
Yeah, so you have a public, the collapse of the building floor was an emergency declared by the building inspector.
That's fixed.
And that's what spurred this whole thing.
Got it.
And then that's been stabilized, but as a result, we still have a situation with the pond that hasn't been fixed in. We're not asking, you know, we're not really asking to look at the final solution under the emergency order, but it's getting flow. I think it's really important that we get flow back into those pipes, because protecting the, you know, last time we had the big rainstorm, you guys started pumping 2 days beforehand to get the pond level down. So, you know,
At least 24 hours.
they're doing those types of proactive things, but Mother Nature can be very finicky when we like to be able to, we've got the pipes in the ground, we'd like to be able to have those, you know, handle the situation for us. And I agree, again, that what we do here is probably more is better served to be reviewed under the notice of intent.
I'm good for a moment.
Two questions, one question and maybe two. You're asking that you might ask for a separate filing for the,
They've taken that away now.
they've taken that away. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
I had an opportunity to talk to Jennifer, so it was in this filing or an amended filing.
Okay. And I'm in agreement with Jen. I know it'd be nice if we get the water flowing in the pipes, but that isn't part of the emergency cert. The emergency cert was to remedy the issue of the building. So
I mean, I'm interested in facilitating the process, and if we talk to DEP and there's some way that we can keep this work moving forward, I think I would be happier if things are going to move forward before, or, you know, things are going to get placed in the ground, that someone's reviewing this outside of you guys, if there is some kind of continued progress allowed under an emergency cert.
That's exactly my position on that, was that, you know, this, situations like this don't fit the Wetlands Protection Act model. They just don't fit. It's a round peg in a square hole, and it just is not going to get there. We've got what's likely a continuing and ongoing emergency as part of the original building floor failure. Yeah, they've stabilized, but it's not fixed. You've just stabilized it, and you have I'm going to say a precarious situation where you're trying to, where water used to commonly go through and run through the pond and run through the headworks and run through the facility, that's been compromised. That's still an emergency. And we've been fortunate, they've been fortunate, that we haven't had another catastrophic event on top of the one that's already happened. So I think that sort of dialogue with the commissioner the DEP commissioner is appropriate. The earlier the better. You don't blindside them on the 11th hour of the emergency cert expiring. Let's start that dialogue. They may say absolutely not, but why speculate? Let that start happening so we can get better guidance when they come back here, in 14 days, and say, well, geez, this is the progress we've made, and we've got great news, or worse yet, we got bad news.
It seems to me that you should be working diligently to get the design of the new inlet structure done.
Correct.
Make it acceptable as fast as possible, so you're ready to install it as soon as the piping is up there. And the only thing that would prevent you from installing it is this commission saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. And I think you should be pushing us to let you do it, because to rely on the pumps only for emergency situation, you're still in an emergency situation. I wouldn't want to rely on the pumps, especially if they're manually operated. And, I think it's a potential problem in the making to push it off too long. It should be done as quickly as possible. It should be moving toward the new pipe system in place and and functioning the way it should function to equal what was there previously. And it should be done, you should get a design done as quickly as you possibly can, ready to go, and say, we want to install this now. We got a contractor on board, ready to go. He can do it starting tomorrow. And if anything, maybe this commission says, no, stop, fine. If the state wants to get involved, let them get involved. If they want to, but I think we should be moving forward and not hesitating whatsoever. And, another question.
And a lot of progress has been made in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Another question I got, since this incident with the collapse or the potential for a collapse of the building floor in the pipes in the location that's indicated on the plan, that area has been fixed by putting flowable fill or concrete in the pipes. What about downstream of this area? You're going into the existing pipes. Has those been inspected at all?
Yeah,
It looks like this pipe continues and goes partially under other buildings or under buildings. And it would be nice if in this process that those be inspected to make sure we don't have another problem in the waiting. So we fix this and then all of a sudden something else happens.
And we did have the pipes fully inspected all the way from Osgood Pond back up to where
up to where
the collapse was. So we've been in all those pipes. We've evaluated them structurally. They're all in pretty good shape.
Okay.
We've been cleaning some of the sediments and large rocks out of them that came in. And so we've cleared essentially far enough to have a good path where we're connecting the newly laid pipes into the culvert. So that's essentially been cleared out. We've evaluated the arch there. One of the reasons we're tying in ductile iron with some concrete around it, make sure it's a good structural system. We're tying into a system that's
so the only thing
standing
you've
up
got
above
left now, that this system downstream of this work site is fine.
Yep.
The existing system. Now we just need to get this up and functioning so it's functioning on its own and not relying on pumps to control the level of the pond.
Right.
We should do that as fast as possible.
So procedurally, moving forward, you guys are still in the design phase for the 2 concrete structures. You've got the pipe on site, and you're moving forward with pipe installation. Got that. Once you have the design of the concrete structures completed, what else do you need for a final design for an NOI?
Well, from our standpoint, if we complete the design, that means we're professionally responsible for what the design is. So we'll set the criteria and meet the criteria for the existing flow. So if it's acceptable to the commission, we submit that. And then if the commission, wanted to do something in addition to that, that's, between the client and yourself.
So once design is complete on the 2 structures, that sounds like that's the last element of design for the NOI submission, the record plans?
Well,
you
they
still-
need mitigation. There's I think some cleanup that needs to be done with the downstream end, but I think those things, if they're not ready and this work is approved and ready to be done, could be conditioned. I don't.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, once that NOI is under consideration and in the approval process, they're probably on the lead time on having these precast structures made, so that when they get approval of NOI, the structures are due to be delivered and can be installed under the NOI. That would be a nice procedural way to do it. I guess we're still a little uncertain as to the timing on what we have, but it would be good to follow that path, I think.
And that would fit, our timing is, as David said, a couple of weeks in design, and then it's, we're looking at 3 weeks for construction and then transport to the site, and then you've got to put them in the ground. So, and I think the suggestion that the mitigation is conditioned.
Well, the more of
Would
that
be-
that can
would
be
be
designed
perfect.
ahead of time is
Yeah.
great, but, if this starts moving faster, then those things can be considered. And mitigation can also be in a very generic form with details to follow. A lot of times we get planting plans subject to approval by me or something like that. Maybe you identify the area, but don't get into the specifics. There's lots of ways we've done this and it's approvable. I think the more information you have, the easier it is for the commission to approve. Even just so much as knowing the numbers. We're impacting X number of square feet of bank, we need X amount of replication or mitigation. And saying that you will, right, and saying that you will provide that, again, identifying an area if that's possible. The more information you have, the better. But I don't think it needs to be, those things need to be drawings. I think those are things that can come later. It's more important to get the meat of the
Well, I
project
think
done.
it's important to get the structure in place and functioning, and the rest of the stuff can be taken care of afterwards.
Right, but if it's going to be in an order of conditions, I think we just need to know the basics. What I'm saying is the details can follow, but we do need to know the basics.
Well, the way you're talking, you're looking at 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Like, I agree with Doug, get those structures designed so they can go out for bid and get them thinking. That's the most important thing, to stabilize the ponds.
Well, I guess what I want to know is
After that is all ice cream.
how you anticipate this going. So that if they're back in 2 weeks and they have design, you're going to approve the design. If they have design sooner and they want to send this stuff out to bid, who's going to review, or do you want review? That's somewhat worrisome to me, because certainly I'm not going to look at these drawings and be like, ooh, go ahead.
Is there going to be a third-party review? Do we not require that?
I think there needs to be,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, we
And
should.
what if that's the case, if Lisa's going to review this,
Well, I don't know if we're gonna have Lisa, we're gonna have to probably get somebody else.
I can ask her. She's been available to, in fact, she's coming back tomorrow. She may be available to do this if it's kind of, I think because she's been out west and back here looking to do discrete things, like if this were gonna drag on for a while, then maybe not, but I can ask her.
I don't think it is, and like I said, having her review it would go a long way in getting it approved quicker. So I think that, like Doug says, I think the most important thing is to get them structures designed so they can be reviewed. So when you come back in 2 weeks, Lisa's reviewed them, she's comfortable with them. 90% of the time, we're comfortable with them.
You know,
That would go a long way to moving the conversation with the commissioner forward, too.
well, the
Right.
point is, if you get a design done, rather than wait for a meeting to transfer everything to Lisa, if Lisa's gonna do the review, and get her on board up front, so as soon as your design is done, you ship it to her for review, and so that when it comes to us, we've got the information in front of us.
And we can fit that in the schedule.
Yeah, hopefully you can do that in the next 2-week window, so we should be in good shape.
Yeah, so I don't have any issues. I mean, it's,
We want to move as fast as you do. No,
All I know
so,
is
yeah.
Great.
outside review typically moves things faster when the expertise
Yeah.
isn't available to us.
No, we're happy to do that. I mean, we could,
Go ahead,
I
sure.
mean, I think we should, if Lisa's back, we
Yeah,
should
we would
reach
just-
out to her right away,
Yeah.
check her availability. We'll
You know,
send her what we've got so far.
I guess the only thing we would ask was to, make sure it was expedited in this case. I mean,
Let me ask you a question along that same line. Are you guys doing anything else, or is this your job?
Excuse me?
Are you guys doing anything else besides this mill repair?
Oh, we're always doing something else, right?
Well,
As engineers or my client?
both of you, you're standing in front of us, telling us what needs to be done. Doug has made a good point. You should be pushing this thing like it's on fire.
We are.
If you're doing something else in the middle, that's a problem
No,
too.
yeah, and I don't disagree. We're continually having someone working on
Because
things.
when you set time standards to say, well, we need 2 weeks to do this and 3 weeks to do that, if you're working on other projects, maybe you ought to just work on this one.
I hear you.
I mean, it's hard for me to feel bad for you, if you're working somewhere else too. You're not gonna get a lot of sympathy from me on that.
His guys are out there every day.
All of you should be out there every day,
We are.
all of you.
Well, that's a great message, Al. I
I'm just
appreciate
not gonna
that.
have any mercy if I find out that this thing is delayed because you got another job going somewhere else. I'll bring a hammer down on you.
No, this is, sure, this is our number one priority
Yeah,
in my company, not just me.
Alright?
But I'm out
The
here basically every day,
commission is
including,
looking to expedite this.
yeah.
Yeah,
And work
Yeah.
with you to expedite it. So now we need you to bring the finished product to
Yep.
us as quickly as possible. And, you will try to expedite a review of it. That will be required so that,
just to be
the
along
only thing
those
you're asking
lines.
for us is, can we put it in the ground?
Conceptually, this is where we were a week ago Friday, where we had a plunge pool, we didn't really have anything engineered. And then in the last, from our standpoint, in the last 10 days, there's been a lot of engineering done. People have been out there, people have been down inside the pipes, so it's upside down. But the plunge pool, here's the pond, and the plunge pool was here, there was a couple circles in the line, and there's been we've done a lot of real engineering on this. I mean, it's just a priority for us, and a priority client.
You've accomplished a lot in 2 weeks, I have to give, we have to really quick.
Another emergency, to satisfy the emergency, bring things up and put it in the plunge pool. And then file the final construction later, where you got more time. But if you're ready to go with
Yeah,
the final design, you brought it up to that point, let's do that.
Along those lines, one of the things we looked at with the plunge pool was to get to the depths we are, all of a sudden we were disturbing a lot more resource area. So we're trying to, we're also trying to balance the same concerns you are, resource area versus getting this thing done.
I think you have our agreement, we're telling you to get it done.
We appreciate that, thank you.
So
Next item.
I'll talk to Lisa tomorrow, I'll reach out to DEP tomorrow, and we'll at least explore those avenues and hope we can get as much done in the next 2 weeks as possible, sounds like.
So we need to continue.
Excellent. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And just so you know too, I get daily updates from Tanya on what's going on site, and I've been out a couple times.
So I take
And
it that,
Julie's monitoring, we're getting reports.
I
so-
read Julie's minutes, that's very thorough.
we're satisfied with
Huh?
impacts of what they're doing
Yeah,
to
we're
minimize.
going through everything to cool down, so any turbidity is
Great. Okay. Next one is 242-1696-50 Wilton.
So to expedite this matter, I will, we did receive plans. So plans were submitted to Lisa after the last meeting. I can't remember the timing. Maybe Mr. Lanya can refresh my memory. I think it was the day of the last meeting, right? Because so, again, since Lisa was away, she just got back to this today and agreed that with the, I guess as you look at it, the plan on the left, this is divided into two projects, left and right. She's largely satisfied that the changes Mr. Lanya made satisfied her comments to him on that regard. She continues to have concerns about the project on the right. I can read, I sent you her email today, and Ken, did you get a chance to read it?
I did, yes, ma'am.
She said, again, she's satisfied with the work near the P&O Series BVW. She said, I do have several remaining concerns regarding the proposed basin and emergency drainage channel associated with the N&M Series wetlands. Specifically, the design calls for a foot of dead storage between the bottom of the basin, elevation 154, and the 12-inch orifice at elevation 155, and no way for it to drain down between runoff events. And Mr. Lanya has admitted that the material out there is not anything that's going to infiltrate. Based on the proposed grading of the basin and emergency drainage channel relative to the adjacent M-Series wetland, which is way at the bottom corner, almost out of sight on the right-hand side of that plan. It also appears that the wetland would drain into the detention basin. That channel is several feet below the adjacent wetland. And given, it also appears that the wetland would drain into the basin, that the outlet of the basin would contribute to the dewatering of the wetland. Based on space constraints, it does not appear feasible to add a berm between the wetland and the basin channel as was done with the other proposed basin. My other concern about that area, and it was a concern of yours when you were out there some time ago, is that it deforests a significant portion of the buffer zone to basically make this basin. That's my concern. That wasn't something Lisa necessarily addressed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lanya. My recommendation to them was to offer you the opportunity to get approval on one and perhaps withdraw the other, and if you can come up with something different that would appease them on that, they could potentially amend the order of conditions, or you could choose to refile separately, but I do know you had some concerns about moving the project forward, so over to you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Kenneth Lanier, Cornerstone Land Consultants, representing Aimco North Andover. As Jen had alluded to, we did receive an email from Lisa and Jennifer today regarding the review of the previously submitted NOI, and it does appear that Lisa is comfortable with the northern portion of the design and has a couple of concerns with the southern portion. So ultimately, the goal here, as we all have been, trying to achieve over the last 4 years, is just to try and alleviate the already overtaxed existing drainage system. One statement that I would like to ultimately disagree with on Lisa's end is that this basin will drain the wetland more so than the already existing conditions. There are two outlets that currently have pipes into both those wetland areas that are at or below what we're proposing for this basin as far as elevations go. They already drain the wetland. That technically is the purpose of what this whole system is in place for, and one of the major reasons why it is overtaxed. It does take a large volume of water into those two inlets that ideally in larger storm events immediately overtax that closed drainage system and flood that entire area by the 20 set of buildings, and then entering into the system right beside the clubhouse. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is actually redirect that water. I mean, that is the purpose of what we are doing here. We're not trying to drain the wetland. The wetland already drains onto our property. As a matter of fact, it drains onto the property in 6 different locations. This particular project only addresses 3 of those locations, and we would anticipate to have the other 3 before you this year. So I don't know if I would agree with Lisa on that statement that this particular design will drain the wetland any more than what's already there draining the wetland. As far as the dead space that she is discussing on the basin elevation prior to the outlet structure, we did originally have this slated to have 6 to 8 inch minus riprap in the basin, and ultimately there would then be only about a 4 inch settling area for material, almost like a sediment forebay prior to entering into the outlet. Again, that was mostly there for the availability to clean any debris that would come over from the wetland, as we do have a feeling, or in the past, Royal Crest has struggled with maintenance of these drainage facilities. So our hope was to have that lower area almost act as a sump, so that we could ensure that there would be a maintainable area prior to the inlet of the storm drainage system, so that we could clean it out on a regular basis, which I alluded to in the operations maintenance manual that was submitted along with the revised plans a couple of weeks ago to Lisa and the commission. So I'm interested to hear the commission's response. Right now, as we had discussed at the previous hearings for Building 12, we're under Board of Health type order to complete those projects, and part of my contract with those projects will include this particular project as well, trying to get those all connected at the same time. So I was asked by my client to appear tonight, not request a continuance, and see if there was any opportunity for us to be able to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe?
So it's a rare occasion when we get mixed opinions on Lisa's review. But again, this is a long, drawn-out process, and my memory may not be as good as what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the area that's in question with the wetland area may drain more rapidly or more completely onto this property. Is that over? Well, I guess we don't have the overall site, but does that back into those properties on Hillside Street?
This is on the backside,
It does.
right adjacent to, what's the street up above?
It's Montero Way.
Montero
Quail, yeah, and
Well, Quail Run Drive
is above the other one.
to the north, and one side of Quail Run Drive drains, so I guess Quail Run Drive is like a U, and
This-
the left side of Quail Run Drive drains into the northern basin. The southern side of Montero Way drains into this basin, along with the large tract of very deep homes that are on Hillside. And that wetland actually extends all the way out almost to 114.
So I'm asking the question, in trying to force my memory, because I do remember neighbors out there who came to very early parts of this meeting concerned about us sending more water their way, because they, was it another part of the project where they were already alleging at the time that the water was draining from their property onto Royal Crest,
No.
and they didn't want that to be reversed?
I think the two, and refresh my memory, the two ladies that were here, I believe, are in that area on the backside of Hillside, and
That's
they were
what I'm
concerned
remembering.
that their wetland was expanding.
Right.
And-
Exactly what I'm remembering.
And I'm trying to,
And now
And-
Lisa's saying it's,
Well, again,
we're concerned that we're going to be draining, well, it always did drain
Well,
that way.
and again, I don't want to say that Lisa's not making a good statement. I just,
No, I don't mean to either.
she's been, I mean, this has obviously been, something that she's had in, a struggle in her scenario. So she probably didn't look at this as a big picture. If you were to just look at this for its individual merit, it does appear like just by looking at the topography that wetland area will drain into this basin. That's exactly what will happen. She's 100% correct.
I don't think she's...
And it's what it did.
Yeah, right.
And it's what it's always done.
I agree.
And that's what the neighbors even said.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think she means it's going to drain the wetland in that it's going to dry out the wetland, or I think she's just saying for the intention of the basin to kind of get water off of the site and the way we discussed it today, I think she said, if this were just, let's say, an expansion of the wetland to give the water more place to go, she would understand. But the way this is designed, where the system can't really move the water, it's actually going to provide, she kind of described it as the water is just going to sit there.
Well, in that lower 1 foot portion, I agree with her completely. We
Right.
actually took out the low flow drain line that was in there because she had suggested it, and we removed it as one of her comments. It had one previously. We took it out. I agreed with her that it would drain it out. I think that we weren't looking at this particular basin the same as the basin to the north, because the basin to the north now became a constructed vegetated wetland. It should not have a low flow drain. I completely agree. We could replace the low flow drain and not be concerned with the 1 foot of dead space, as she calls it, containing or keeping any water in the basin. But I'm not particularly concerned with that water holding a little bit of water, that basin holding a little bit of water in it. The water is ponding right off the property line in those folks' backyards.
How is this daisy chained together?
Okay.
The foundation drains from 24, 25, and 26 find their way to this basin?
That is correct.
So if the
Well-
concern is that the
Well,
basin's
not
holding
really.
water, does it back right back into the...
No, the foundation drains for 26, 25, and 24 find their way into the drainage system in the driveway. This,
the front, okay.
well, no, in that driveway right
Okay,
to
I see it,
the
yep.
side of it. You can see the black dots in the center of the road. Those are the catch basins.
Yep.
This basin has those inlets that show pretty much where the triangle comes to the points on either end.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two inlets that actually also enter into that same drainage system. So what ends up happening is you get, let's call it 10 acres of wetland water entering into those two pipes. It fills up that drainage system very rapidly, and then ultimately it ends up bubbling up out of those catch basins because it can't control or handle that water.
There's no outlet.
Well, there is no outlet. Once it goes into that drainage system, the only outlet is the one that goes out to Berkeley. It gets in the system, it's in the system. So our goal here, and again, it's always been that way, is to evaluate these drainage trains individually and see if we can modify the path of the drainage as we did exactly with the G train. So the G train, if you recall, went down that main drive to what we considered the X train, which was really the root of all evil and where all the backup and flooding began. We took that G train offline, put it in its own basin where that old T-series isolated wetland was, and then ran it directly to the K train where there was more volume because it's a 36-inch pipe. And that had a huge impact on reducing a lot of the flooding issues. In this particular case, we're mimicking that similarly, where we have that swale coming out and now taking what enters into that train there as the E train, and through that swale behind the facilities building, we'll now put it into what's called the C train, which again has more volume available. So ultimately, she's correct. She's 1,000% correct that what we're doing is when that wetland drains, our intention isn't to drain it, but our intention is to give it somewhere else to go where we have more space available on the property to handle it. Because right now, where it's going, that system can't handle that flow.
Does that compromise the integrity of that wetland system?
One of her concerns is the wetland's at 159 and this basin is at 154. So basically you have water coming she also has concerns, and I know you have concerns about groundwater, and she could believe that in the that you have a perch system in this M series, and that in your other series, you don't have that situation. So when they dig below this 159 in the series that she didn't have the concerns about, they won't already be in standing water. Her concern here is you're digging next to a wetland that has an elevation of 159, going down to 154, expecting to have volume, but you just dug 5 feet below the water table, technically. So she's not convinced this will work.
And I'm not sure I disagree with that statement. I would agree. I mean, our goal isn't to provide volume. Our goal was to provide an area that could be maintained, that would collect the water and be able to redirect it. Right now, what you have happening here, and again, I understand her argument on the elevations, but if you look, those 2 inlets that come into that already existing drainage system, one is at 254.99 and one is at 256. So they're already at the low portion of that existing basin, minus that 1 foot, which again in the previous design was really only 4 inches because of the 6 to 8 inch riprap. So I would agree that there's perched water table everywhere, not just in the upper northern section. I'd say it's, it's all over the property. We've been out there and done, 50 test pits. It's the same soil, same situation. The whole thing's flat. I think that wetland area is really an extension of what was previously a wetland area that covered the whole property. And, they just built it up and around it and chose to put these inlets in to collect it. So the purpose of that basin and why we dug it so low wasn't necessarily to provide any volume. It's a very small basin. It's not going to provide volume. But what it does is, right now, those 2 inlets, which are 1 foot higher than the bottom of that basin and 2 feet higher than the bottom of that basin, currently don't always have standing water in them because there are channels. And you can see on the plan, there's these dashed lines that enter into where these inlets come in. Mm-hmm. Those dashed lines are similar to what you would find on agricultural land. They actually excavated out drainage channels that led directly to these inlets. Well, the problem is, and what I see happening is, nobody's cleaned these things for 45 years. So what's happened, they clog up. There is no standing water in there, and what ends up happening is the water now backs up onto the abutting properties. And I think that's evident from what the neighbors had been saying technically here for 4 years. I mean, those young ladies were here at the very beginning of this process 4 years ago. So again, I don't disagree with Lisa. I just think that in this situation where we're just trying to redirect some water to provide a little bit better flow for the internal systems by those 25, 24, 23, and 22 buildings, to get that water from that wetland that comes all the way off of the hillside down into that area, redirected around to that C train, it just gives this property a better chance to handle that flow. And I'm amenable for, reviewing that with Lisa and potentially, not starting on this portion of construction until after we've gotten, a decent portion of the upper northern construction done. My only issue here is as Jen had alluded to, there are, I'm going to call it 60 trees that have to come down. So when I bring the tree guy out, he's going to want to do it all in one shot. When you do a tree removal of that size, you don't, you're not bringing your local tree guy, you're bringing in kind of like a forestry guy to, really bang it out in 2 days and clean it up and get it out of there. Again, all we're looking for is volume and access to try to better control that water. I mean, if this commission doesn't feel that this particular design does that, I'm not entirely sure how else to handle those 2 inlets beyond really having to resize and excavate that whole drainage system along the buildings 24, 25, 23, and 22.
So, over a long, drawn-out process, we've been waiting long periods of times. We've moved things through pretty readily with some great agreement. Probably for the first time in 4 years, I'm hearing you want to vote want us to consider and vote the whole thing as a single project?
Well, I'd like...
Is there not any more conversation with Lisa that can, because you made a very cogent argument to me that I understand, and Lisa's a hell of a smarter than I am.
Oh, yeah, I don't think Lisa would disagree with me. I just
could-
haven't had an opportunity to talk to her, Joe.
That's what I think.
You know what I
I think
mean?
we're so darn close on this. I would hate to carve this up into, pieces like Solomon's baby, and
And
'cause I
again,
don't think we're going to gain anything in that. I think we want to understand exactly the satisfaction and of what the intent here is, and honestly, I think there's no other alternative. And I think continuing for another 2 weeks is a better option to have that happen, at least try to let that happen.
And I think with Lisa coming back, that can more than likely happen. I just know that, these guys they're on me to get started. So, and again, we've kind of discussed this over the past couple of years as well. I mean, their money is appropriated for construction, engineering, and everything in, 3-month sections. If the money doesn't get used, it gets taken. That's how it works. And the money's there for me to do it, and I'm just trying to get it done and get it started.
Make a living.
Make a living, yeah. I'm not making a living, but I'm just trying to keep everybody happy, that's all. And ultimately, I know that the Board of Health, they've been very amenable. They actually held a meeting with that Building 12 and Building 16, allowed us to, get that approved through you folks, and then ultimately, I know that their goal was to hopefully have us start construction on those buildings March 15th. So our hope was to try and have this underway so that I could have, that funding and everything be available and begin that construction. So again, I know that's not your problem. I'm just trying to give you folks an explanation of why I'm here tonight and didn't just submit a letter saying, yep, let's continue for 2 weeks. I didn't know, ultimately, if Lisa and I coordinate on this and, at the next meeting in 2 weeks, if Jen could potentially have the order written up and ready to go, which might save us 2 weeks beyond the next meeting, would this commission be amenable to me starting right away with the tree removal instead of waiting that additional? I know anything we do within that appeal period is our risk, but I don't want to do anything beyond what the
That holds
commission...
true usually with zoning, but our appeal period, I don't think you can work with it. It's an outright prohibition. You cannot work with the appeal period.
Right,
In wetlands.
in the 10-day appeal period. So that would still probably put you in line with March 15th start.
Right.
I do have to say, we don't have the best on-site working relationship.
Oh, no,
I don't get monitoring reports. We're
Yep.
not alerted to pre-construction meetings. This is the kind of project where that's gonna have to happen, or it's not gonna go well,
Mm-hmm. Right.
so.
Well,
Just,
like you
a lot
said-
of our other projects have been sort of near isolated areas that are disturbed. It hasn't been such a big deal not to have that kind of coordination, but working in wetland and this close to wetland, we're definitely gonna, I think we need an outside monitor. It can't be you. It needs to be someone you hire to be submitting reports, because it's clear when you're on site and working, you don't have time to submit monitoring reports, which is fine, I get it. But, so just some of those things need to be clarified as well.
All right, so it seems to me,
I think we stopped.
Jack,
think we
you have a
stopped
question?
Yeah, I mean,
Bounce around.
The goal, the reason we have third-party reviewers is to, marry the design with the, with the proposed design with the peer design and make sure everything is, on the up and up. I believe it is, but it seems like there's still some confusion between you and Lisa. If that can be resolved in the next couple of weeks, that's usually what we shoot for. Although I would add that I don't know, it's late in the game, but I don't know if there's any alternatives been considered for removing all those 60 trees.
Well, all 60 trees aren't right there, so it's split up. Obviously, there's more trees to the north, and so it's probably, let's call it 35 in that particular area. Alternatives, again, that basin really isn't very big. If you go out there, it's not a large area. So alternatively, there really isn't much we could do unless we put an extremely deep concrete structure in to handle the flow, which would be, very costly. Those inlets are there. I'd like to say that there's an easier way, maybe just put it all in a pipe and bring it around, but even that swale that comes around that would redirect into the C train, it actually, if you can look on that southern side, and this is why it, and I know the minute I tell Lisa this, she'll understand. As you can see, that wetland continues down and goes right behind Building 38. It was the very first building that we came in before you folks to do when I started 4 years ago. And that entire wetland to the southern portion, another, let's call it 8 acres, drains into that intermittent stream channel that runs out by Building 38. So that continuously goes down lower. So what ends up happening is when those get clogged and that flow backs up out of the system in the closed drainage system in the road, it rises up and then ends up going where I'm sending it now anyways. The problem is it doesn't happen quick enough. And it ends up flooding that whole clubhouse area and the roadway, right, especially where Building 22 and 23 are. So in this particular case, it all eventually heads down into the area where I'm sending it. It's just whether or not we do it by choice or whether or we do it when it's, causing a problem during an event.
Okay. No more questions.
No? Deb? Doug? All right, well, I'm agreeing with Joe as far as, I know you want to get your project going, and so do I. I think you and Lisa coming back,
Mhm.
I don't think it's a, totally redesign. I think it's just you and her getting together.
Yep.
And I think, and we'd be comfortable with that. I kind of got mixed signals from her letter.
Me too.
So, and Jen's recommendations pretty much echo Lisa. So, I mean, it's card for us to vote, I think, to approve this project as presented.
I understand.
So I think we should continue.
Okay.
So we're going pretty good right along anyways. Been the
Yep.
last 4 years. It's a pretty big project.
Like I said, I couldn't continue. They asked me to come.
Well,
so
I think we're in the same boat. Either, we make a decision tonight, which probably wouldn't
Right.
be in
It's
your
not gonna be
favor,
beneficial, I
or
understand.
you have 2 weeks to work it out with Lisa and I draft the order. Even
Yep.
if we issued something, we still wouldn't be issuing it for 2 weeks. It keeps
Right.
you on the same timeline, and the outcome may be the same, but you at least have the potential for it to be better, so.
So let me
Right.
just address the one major issue that Jen had brought up that I want to make sure that the commission is. I know maybe not all of you have been out there, but some of you have been out there and saw the trees. So, I want to just address taking those trees down and if there's something that you think maybe that we can do that would potentially, screen that area with the concern of taking the trees down.
Well, my bigger concern about removing all of those trees is that if you have a system that's potentially not going to be functional, I don't think taking trees down to do something that's minimally functional makes sense. If you and Lisa decide that this system really does have value and it can do what it is you think it can do and the purpose of the project, then maybe it is worth, none of these trees are hundreds of years old. There are
Right.
some, fairly old trees there, but nothing is ancient. It clearly was deforested at some time not too long ago. And you are going to propose a planting plan. That's the other thing. The planting plans would have to be conditioned to be approved. There aren't done yet. And I think more than anything, because these require waivers, they're in the no disturbance zone, they alter some BVW, although it's along these dug channels, it isn't critical BVW, I would call it, or essential habitat or any of those kinds of things. But, they can't be maintained, they can't be mowed down, they can't be mulched, they can't be, these are gonna be basically constructed wetlands that serve your storage and other functions, stormwater functions.
Okay.
Correct. So I guess what I'll do then is I'll work with Jen and Lisa over the next week or so, try to get everything defined by next Friday, get any revised plans back into you folks, and see you on the 22nd.
That'd be great. Give me a motion to continue.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, I'm out of paper. Meeting over.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Yep,
Out of paper?
out of paper.
I think that's part of regulation.
It's getting a little onerous over here.
Next one is violation and enforcement order on 458 Johnson Street.
I don't think, you're not for, this is for.
Paper here, rip that off.
Yeah.
I'm only moved down the list.
Could we take,
That can continue.
458 is not here, so could we go to 899
Yes, we
Johnson
can.
Street? Although it's listed as 889, it's 89. Okay, she's got it right.
889.
Some of our files are mislabeled on this one. Oops. Ooh, that's, what happened? So you have a couple things in front of you regarding this particular, so when we went out to do the RESCA review, the wetland is actually drains into an intermittent stream with associated BVW that comes at the rear of this property, but up on the hill, believe it or not, such that the property lies below. It was clear when we were out doing the review of the delineation that land clearing and some grading to level out the backyard or to create more backyard had been done. So I issued a violation letter and just said, please contact me. So last week, they did contact me and I did go out to the site. What you see in front of you now is the approved plan for this particular house. And you note the backyard is cut off right behind the house. I have the feeling.
What year is that approved plan?
I don't know, does it show on the portion that I printed for you? No, you don't have it.
I don't think we have
We don't have that, Jen.
that plan.
We don't have it for either one. The only thing we have left is Willow Street.
So there are 3 plans here.
How far road's 889? Is that out by Mill?
This is right next to the Resca property, so there's
Right up by
Mill
Mill,
Street, Resca, and then this house.
Okay.
So this is the approved plan
So it's the backside of Clay Pit Hill,
system, yep.
right?
I don't,
It's right near Mansour.
on the other
No,
side
no,
of
further
Lincoln
out.
Street.
A little further
No,
in
it's-
towards town.
This is the backside of, what's the
Oh,
street
toward-
behind you? Tucker Farm. Tucker Farm is behind them.
Okay. Tucker Farm. Oh, wow, okay, further, so it is by the inside.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
going
but it's
toward
not
Boston
near
Hill.
Okay.
So this is the plan of the adjacent property, which has the wetland on it, and this is the Resca delineation, which partially extended onto their property.
Okay.
So
Yeah, see where this fits in.
before I discovered the 901 Johnson plan, it appeared that the work that they did on the site was more than 50 feet away from the wetland. But when you look at this plan for their neighbors at 901, you can see that the wetland on 901, which is directly adjacent to this clearing, the wetland comes way up on the adjacent property, which is, you have there and is on the screen. So I guess we're just looking about, I discussed with them about filing an after-the-fact RDA until I realized the adjacent wetland is basically right at the toe of slope. The other thing that's hard to sort of sort out in all of this is that they just purchased the property in 2015, and it is clear sometime between when this house was built and now, or when they bought it, the land had been raised, elevated, such that now their property sits well above this wetland on the adjacent property. When you look at the plan for construction of the house and septic system, that wasn't the case. I don't think there's much, it's clear from what the work that they did that there's vegetation in the ground, that they didn't raise that elevation. There's already vegetation established that shows that they didn't bring in fill material and raise the elevation. But it does, their clearing is right up to the edge of this wetland, so hence in the 25. So I guess my recommendation to you would be that you could approve the clearing and the regrading of the backyard under an after-the-fact RDA, and perhaps require them under an enforcement order, just as a means to do the work, to replant something along the property line with the neighbor that would provide a better buffer to the wetland. The issue is when you look at 901, as an approved plan, and you have it there, their septic system with the wetland in the backyard goes right up to the edge of the wetland. So the buffer, you know, would have some limited function, but
Okay. Joe?
Come back and sneeze.
All right, Jack?
So the suggestion is to replant the buffer.
along the property line with this
Yeah.
wetland.
And put up markers. That's about it, right? And clean it out, right, with the brush pile?
Right, and file an after-the-fact RDA for the
Yeah.
clearing and grading. It would just sort of monument that as being permitted.
How much, I mean, like, how long of the 25-foot is disturbed? Like lengthwise,
It's hard to say.
30 feet?
I provided them with these, you know, that flag 1A to 4A that runs along the property boundary
Oh,
is
okay.
probably the disturbed area. The only
Looks like about 50
thing out there
feet.
we could probably use to make a plan is the wetland flags that exist from the RESCA filing that are on their property could be used to pull some ties out to the backyard to figure out the extent of the clearing.
Does the 25-foot come up against that deck? Does it?
This is not their property, this is the
That's
abutters.
the other one, okay. Well, I agree with the approach, and that's something we've done before. So that's all I have.
No?
I agree with Jen's recommendation, as she wrote it up. I have no problem with that at all.
Deb?
I agree with Jen's
Right.
as well.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Yeah, I'm in harmony with the commissioners as far as Jen's recommendation.
So I invited the homeowners here tonight just in case I wanted them to be part of the process. My recommendation was also to give you till March 10th to provide some kind of filing and restoration plan, and that would be heard at the March 22nd meeting. If you need more time, now's the time to discuss it with them, but the filing time would be kind of up to you. That's fine.
You can have one time if you need it.
You can always,
I just want to get, what do you suggest?
we can discuss that. I just wanted to make sure the process was something
Yeah.
you understood and they understood, and that everybody was going to be on the same page before I recommended you go ahead and do this, and they didn't agree with me.
Oh, okay.
Okay, what do you want first, the enforcement order or you have to vote on the enforcement order?
I think,
You can issue it. You can just
I-
issue
I-
what you want.
so I was recommending that we modify the violation letter to require both a after-the-fact RDA and a restoration plan by March 10th.
Right.
And then you would issue, at that time, the enforcement order to allow them to do the restoration work, and the RDA would allow them to have done the clearing that they did.
Okay,
Sounds great.
Okay, so I will issue the revised violation letter.
very good. All set?
So let me just
Joe?
come back to where I started. So when I was trying to stifle the sneeze, I may have missed the point that you made. I mean, these houses that I know out in this area are old, relatively old houses. They're not-
Relatively old, yep,
I mean,
90s, right? 80s and
80s,
90s?
pre-2550 is my point. So,
Well, not, because this one, well, this may have been a new septic system, but this is 901, their neighbor, with the 2550 on the plan.
Yeah, they're old houses though.
that's why I want to be careful that if, we're out there looking at other things, that person, whether it's this current owner or the prior owner or the prior owner before that, who had a house properly built in full compliance to the rules and regulations that were in place at that time, can continue to enjoy their home, so long as it continued, if they were always mowing it and
Right.
always doing those things. I just want to make sure we're not
This,
penalizing.
right, this is brand new. The work is brand new.
It-
They
so-
acknowledge that. They didn't
Okay,
know that the
okay.
wetland either
So-
A, existed on this house next
So
door,
it's not that
or...
we're trying to go back to something years ago,
No.
it's this recent stuff.
All I was
Okay.
saying was it became clear in looking at all, digging back in the files, that their lot is feet higher than it was when it was originally built and approved in those plans. But they didn't do that work, was all I was saying.
Actually, I couldn't conclude that from those plans, because back in those eras, everybody used assumed datums,
Well,
everybody-
at least in the plan, first of all, it doesn't show the yard disturbed back that far.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at some of the other plans, it shows gentle grades. It's now just a drop off. But like I said, there's vegetation and roots in that drop off. It's not like it was.
I'm just
materials.
recognizing that I remember the Wild West, what this
Yeah.
place used to look like, and the way things used to get done. That house was probably not, and the yard was probably not altered heavily from that original design. It was probably just simply built that way.
It's possible. That's why I said, that's the part that's hard to understand.
But-
It's
but
clear
If
when you
we're
look.
trying to minimize, or at least address the
Yeah.
most recent issue, and get some understanding of that and some sensitivity to that, and then prevent it in the future,
Right.
lesson learned. That's all we're trying to do.
Right.
But I don't want to go out, and I don't think you're trying to go out on a wholesale fashion and drum up these violations that may not be violations.
No, and I mean, we're about to go back to another one. I mean, it's just a matter of if you clear and you're within the 100-foot buffer zone, we can't call some people on it and not others. And it's not like we go out looking for these things, but when they present themselves, they need to be
Okay, I
addressed.
understand.
Can I ask a question? What does the restoration require us to do?
Some plantings along the side with your abutter. So you've created lawn now that drains right down into that wetland. The ideal thing is to have some kind of buffer between the wetland and your lawn. So if you decide to maintain your lawn with, some fertilizers, we'll ask you to use low nitrogen and all sorts of things. But, if you're going to maintain it and there's going to be some runoff, and this is just to put sort of a buffer between the wetland and that new lawn area. Shrubs would be great.
Okay, all set? Thank you.
Thank you.
So next, we have is,
So same process for the one for 458 Johnson Street. I think on 458, all I have is pictures.
wanna do, okay,
I had the whole pile up of our historic aerials from then, which is neither here nor there. It just sort of verifies that when the house was built, the 2005 aerials show no backyard, and progressively by 2008, there's a bigger backyard. And now there's an even bigger backyard, but,
No, it's recent history, not going all the way back to the 80s.
right.
Nope.
I don't have
That's
those.
what we didn't get.
I don't have those photos, so I was trying to make it quick. Sorry.
Well, I didn't know we had them as recently as the 2000s.
well, for starters, your butter is, the applicant isn't here. So what we discussed,
We're talking about, which one?
458 Johnson.
458, okay.
So, I mean, if you were happy with the letter that we gave for 889,
889.
it's the same letter as 458.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a different issue here, which I just want to make sure you're on board with. There were two areas of clearing. One is this area of trees. Were out there with me, but the area of trees is between, there's a driveway on an adjacent lot between the area of trees and the wetland. So they basically cleared like an island of trees. They didn't clear the buffer zone per se, because there's a driveway in between. But if you look at the second photo, there is an intermittent stream that feeds into the wetland system that runs along Marble Ridge Road and eventually into Mosquito Brook, potentially, I would guess. And so along both banks of that stream, everything was completely removed. The homeowners informed me that as part of their purchase and sale, there was a lot of junk in there, and they had it removed, which also required removal of the brush.
They removed everything.
It's
So,
basically a clear cut.
right. So again,
It was
if you're
easy to
okay with
spot.
it, I'll have them file. They say a lot of the trees in that grove were dead. Can't verify that. But if they file an after-the-fact RDA for the removal of those trees, I honestly, with the driveway in between those trees and the wetland, if they, however they want to plant that, I mean, I'd prefer it was native, and maybe we can specify, but that isn't the bigger concern. I think they need to replant both banks of the brook on the property and monument it. And that portion should be under an enforcement order.
Yeah, so,
And they acknowledged that as part of their purchase and sale agreement, that this was an agreed-to provision?
They acknowledge
So
that.
they're a party to it?
They are, but they also, you know, they formerly lived on Berry Street and informed me that they had wetland markers on their property, so they identified wetlands by wetland markers. I informed them that not all wetlands in North Andover have those markers, and
But
one
that's-
should be careful
But that's a
about.
positive point for our marker program, that obviously it does work. If they acknowledge that they could identify them that way, we'll keep ordering that they be put up.
Right, so.
Okay.
So again, I would start with the violation letter, updating them to the timeline under which this needs to be done. When it comes to the meeting, we, or you, approve potentially the negative RDA and issue the enforcement order to do the restoration work.
okay. All right. Next one is 242-1639 modification request for 351 Willow.
I gotta get back to my
John, you had
agenda.
to sit through it all, huh? Man,
What did we tell you, 7:30? Sorry.
No problem.
we'll make it up to you, John.
We also need to.
Next time you go first.
Just, before we can do that, but let's not forget, we have some other continuances. I just need my
Yeah,
letters
well-
back, because they, everything on the
Everything we had to the front.
Yeah, we just have one.
Good evening. For the record, John Moran from the Moran Cameron Group. We're here tonight representing Muffin Realty Trust with regards to a modification request to an existing order of conditions for their property located at 351 Willow Street South, DEP file number 242-1639. The commission may recall back in February of 2015, your commission actually issued an order of conditions for a proposed addition onto their facility at 351 Willow Street. It included an additional parking lot, stormwater management. The plan that you see before you is one of the original site plans. Willow Street is in the upper right-hand corner or the northeasterly corner of the site. The addition was out in the back portion of the property. And we have wetland resource areas on the northern side of the property and on the southwesterly side of the property. Last summer, your commission actually issued a modification to some minor changes to the building addition. And it recently came to our attention that the proposed addition was going to need a sewer line. The architects talked to us. What they didn't realize is currently there's an existing sewer line running out the back. It goes to a grease trap, runs along the side of the building, out to a manhole out front. What the architects didn't realize is that about 4 years ago, I believe, we took the flow from that effluent line, actually ran it into a new pump chamber, ran it up to a treatment plant out at the front of the facility, which we had to get permitted through you guys as well. And that was because all the flow that was leaving the back of the building was based on processes inside the building. While the architects were thinking they were just going to tap into the sewer line just beyond that grease trap. And we explained to them, well, you can't, because that effluent's being treated. The flow that you're going to have is really from a couple of bathrooms and a break room. We don't have to treat that to meet the standards. So what we're proposing is a new sewer line from the addition along the existing driveway that's on the northerly side of the property. We will need 2 sewer manholes to get around the building. We'll be tying into the existing sewer manhole out in the front. All proposed work is located within the pavement. The closest point from the wetland edge to the sewer is 27 feet. We can't get it any further. Luckily, we could get at least greater than 25, because again, we've got that other sewer line that we're going to be right up against. What we're proposing is, originally we had silt sock. Actually, it just changed over to silt fence roughly right about here to this point. We're going to just extend that erosion control, make it all silt fence with silt sock all the way down along the existing access road out to the front. I've already talked to the site contractors. We're hoping to try to do that work for the sewer, most likely probably in August. It is deep, that sewer manhole. By the time we get out to the front, we're about 6 feet down. So we don't have to run into an issue with dewatering. We're going to try to do that most likely in August. If we do have to dewater, right now we're dewatering for the trash compactor building that's out back. We've got a dewatering station out right between these two buffer zones. The 100-foot buffers don't converge up in the back, so we're able to actually discharge. We set up a dewatering basin out there. But again, we're hoping to do that work at a time where we won't have to dewater. And again, we'll have 2 sewer manholes to get around and then connect up to the front.
Joe?
I had 5 questions, he answered them all in the
Okay.
presentation.
Jack?
Looks like we're requesting no waivers for this.
Correct.
That's it.
Deb? Doug? Motion?
Approve the modification as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Will you just let
And
us,
do the
I mean, it's
continuances,
August,
yeah?
but will you let us know when the
Oh,
erosion
absolutely.
control's in, so, thanks.
242-1580, COC request for 1018 Osgood Street, request to continue.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's unanimous.
And then just to ratify the emergency cert for 350 Winthrop Street, 2 trash trucks collided on Route 114, spilling hydraulic oil into the upstream side of the new culvert. So they sought to remove some of the erosion controls and some sediment. I got an update today about what they were doing. It seems like despite the amount of material that went in there, there was limited movement of it, so they're removing very little, and they're gonna keep me updated. So they get 60 days to do this work because it's as part of a emergency response to a hazardous
gallons?
material. 48 or
So it's reportable, right?
15?
Yeah,
It was reportable,
Yeah,
definitely reportable.
Yeah.
I would say it was 30 or 40 gallons, but I'll be truthful, I think it went down a creek.
There wasn't
That's
much
why there
visible.
wasn't any impact,
Well,
'cause
the
I went out
interesting
there,
thing
but
is,
Down the street drain?
well,
No,
the
just went
site
down
was
the brook.
Oh.
frozen, and they had the materials in there soaking it all up, and I guess they removed, but when we got there, the erosion controls didn't look to be impacted. There wasn't sheen or material hanging out there, so
Has it already got by?
It's already
maybe,
fine.
but all our erosion controls are there. You would think at least the erosion controls would have some of that material on them, and our erosion controls were frozen into the bank, so it wasn't.
Some of
Who's
the,
the monitor? Who's the monitor for the project?
Well, Ecotech is on the remediation aspect, but you knew the guy who did the response. They have
Yeah.
the insurance company has somebody who does the
Oh, there's
response.
no wetlands person?
There's someone from Ecotech on the project.
they had a full team out there.
Yep,
They had a team.
They had the dream team out there?
they did. We've used Ecotech as a third-party reviewer twice when it wasn't a stormwater issue.
And Paul was
So
out there.
They're good.
Monitor was out there, the state was out there. We were out there.
We were out there, yeah, and it was snowing or raining or
It was
freezing or
not very
something.
pleasurable. And it was, you could see some of the hydraulic oil sitting on the banks. It was all.
So the motion is to, ratify the emergency cert?
That's right.
Yes.
What's that?
That's the motion.
Okay.
Second.
Was one made and
Second.
seconded? Alan, Deb.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and that's unanimous. And last but not least, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, and that's unanimous.